A brand new Formula One engine regulation just leaked, and it was triggered by Mercedes. After shocking technical evidence surfaced in Bahrain testing, engine manufacturers are reportedly preparing to sign off on an emergency clarification to the 2026 power unit rules. And if this becomes official, Mercedes could lose up to 20 horsepower overnight. This is not a small adjustment. This is a direct response to compression ratio evidence that suggests Mercedes may have engineered performance that changes under race heat, cold inspection, fully legal, hot conditions, potentially far more aggressive. That difference could mean championship-defining power. And the leak reveals the FIA wants compliance under all operating conditions, not just ambient measurement. Which means the gray area is closing fast. So now the question is explosive. Did Mercedes build the most innovative engine on the grid? Or did they build their entire advantage on wording that just disappeared? Because if this regulation is signed before race 1, the competitive order could flip instantly. Subscribe now, because what happens next could reshape the entire season before a single point is scored. Let us break down what this leak actually means. Because this is not a rumor floating around social media. This is a coordinated move. After the compression ratio evidence surfaced in Bahrain, rival teams did not wait for race 1. They submitted technical documentation to the FIA, questioning how Mercedes' engine behaves under full operating temperature. And according to the leaked details, that evidence was convincing enough to trigger immediate action. The key issue revolves around the definition of compliance. The original regulation specified a maximum compression ratio of 16:1, measured at ambient temperature. That phrase was everything. Because engines are inspected cold. If the combustion chamber geometry changes under heat, but passes inspection in the garage, it technically satisfies the written rule. Mercedes, according to the allegations, designed pistons using a thermally reactive alloy. Under race heat, the material expands in a controlled way. That expansion subtly alters the combustion chamber shape, which increases effective compression once the engine is fully hot. More compression means more efficient combustion. More efficient combustion means more torque. More torque means stronger acceleration. And the GPS traces from Bahrain showed exactly that kind of advantage. But here is where the leak becomes explosive. The new clarification reportedly removes the ambient temperature reference entirely. Instead, it demands compliance under all operating conditions. That sounds simple. It is not. Because that single sentence closes the gray area completely. If your engine geometry changes under heat in a way that increases compression beyond the allowed limit, you are now non-compliant. Immediately. No redesign window. No grace period. And that is why this is such a shock. Engines for 2026 are homologated. They are locked. You cannot redesign piston architecture 2 weeks before race 1. If the clarification is signed, Mercedes has only two options. Detune the engine to ensure compression never exceeds the limit under any temperature. Or risk protest and potential disqualification. Detuning means reducing combustion pressure, adjusting ignition timing, sacrificing peak efficiency, which translates directly into lost horsepower. And in modern Formula One, even 10 horsepower can change race outcomes. There is also a second layer. If the engine was originally designed to operate near higher effective compression levels, reducing that parameter may disrupt the balance between combustion and hybrid deployment. The energy recovery system depends on predictable combustion output. Change that relationship, and mapping must be rewritten. Under time pressure. With limited testing data. That increases risk. Now add what happened on track. Antonelli's engine failure after just a few laps in Bahrain raised immediate questions about reliability margins. If higher effective compression was pushing internal components close to structural limits, detuning may improve durability. But it also confirms that the original configuration was operating extremely close to the edge. And that is the exposure. Not just regulatory, mechanical, strategic, psychological. Because while Mercedes recalibrates, Ferrari and McLaren continue gathering data. Understanding tire degradation. Refining race pace. Building confidence. Momentum is shifting. And once momentum shifts early in a regulation cycle, it compounds. So what this leak really tells us is simple. The rulebook is not fixed. It is reactive. And when evidence forces clarification, gray areas disappear fast. Mercedes may have engineered something brilliant. But brilliance built on interpretation is fragile. One clarification. One signature from the manufacturers. And the competitive landscape changes overnight. Now the question is no longer whether Mercedes found extra performance. The question is whether they can survive the consequences of having found it. Because the next official announcement will not just define legality. It may define the entire direction of the season before the first race even begins. Now here is the part nobody inside Mercedes will admit publicly. If this clarification becomes official, it does not just remove power. It forces a philosophical retreat. Because if your competitive edge was built around operating closer to the thermal ceiling of the rulebook, and that ceiling suddenly lowers, everything downstream must adapt. Think about how Formula One projects are structured. Engine performance targets are set months in advance. Aerodynamic drag levels are calculated assuming a certain horsepower figure. Cooling inlets are sized according to projected thermal loads. Gear ratios are selected to maximize peak torque curves. You do not design these systems independently. You design them as one integrated package. If Mercedes truly had an advantage of 15 to 20 horsepower, that advantage would have influenced the entire car architecture. You can afford slightly more drag. You can run more rear wing. You can accept minor instability in fast corners because acceleration compensates on the straight. But if that power disappears, the compromises remain. Suddenly the W17 must perform without the cushion it was built around. And that is where this becomes dangerous. Early testing already suggested rear instability in high-speed conditions. Drivers described moments of unpredictability when wind direction shifted. With extra straight-line speed, you manage that weakness. Without it, you expose it. Now consider the timing again. Testing days are over. The first race is approaching fast. If the new wording is signed, Mercedes must recalibrate combustion maps, hybrid deployment, and cooling thresholds immediately. And recalibration under time pressure is never perfect. Small errors in mapping can create drivability issues. Power delivery might feel less linear. Energy harvesting balance might shift under braking. Drivers need consistency to build confidence. Instead, they are entering the season under regulatory turbulence. There is also the political ripple effect. When the FIA clarifies a rule so quickly, it sends a message. Gray areas will not be tolerated. That means Mercedes will operate under heightened scrutiny all season. Every innovation questioned. Every performance spike analyzed. Every data trace monitored. That changes how aggressively you innovate. And hesitation in innovation is costly. Meanwhile, Ferrari and McLaren move forward without distraction. They refine setups. They complete race simulations. They build momentum. And momentum at the start of a regulation cycle is priceless. Because early understanding compounds into mid-season upgrades. If Mercedes spends the opening round stabilizing performance and defending legality, that gap widens. So the leak is not just about compression ratio. It is about leverage. It is about whether Mercedes can pivot quickly enough to avoid losing strategic ground before a single championship point is awarded. If they adapt smoothly, this becomes a short storm. If they struggle, this becomes the defining moment of their season. And that is the real tension. Not just horsepower. Not just legality. But adaptability under pressure. Because in Formula One, the teams that survive regulatory shocks are the ones that win championships. Right now, Mercedes faces that test. And the season has not even begun. And here is the final layer that makes this even more explosive. Because if this new regulation wording is officially signed before race 1, it does not just affect Mercedes. It reshapes the balance of power among every engine manufacturer on the grid. Think about what this signals. If a team finds performance through interpretation, and rivals respond with coordinated pressure that leads to immediate clarification, the message is clear. Innovation inside gray areas will be challenged instantly. That changes how aggressively manufacturers approach the limits. Ferrari will rethink how far they can push combustion mapping. Red Bull will double-check hybrid deployment strategies. Even customer teams will become more cautious. The regulatory atmosphere tightens. And tight regulation often slows bold experimentation. But Mercedes is at the center of it. Because they are the ones forced to react in real time. If they pivot quickly, recalibrate power delivery, stabilize reliability, and maintain competitive pace, they prove resilience. If they struggle, the narrative hardens. From innovators to overreached. And perception in Formula One spreads fast. Sponsors listen. Drivers notice. Engineers inside rival teams feel momentum shifting. There is also a deeper championship implication. If Mercedes loses even a fraction of the estimated performance advantage, the early races become survival events. Instead of attacking, they defend. Instead of leading development direction, they respond to it. And once you begin a season reacting rather than dictating, the psychological edge fades. History shows this clearly. Teams that control the interpretation of new regulations early often dominate the era. Teams forced into mid-course correction spend the year catching up. This is why Bahrain was not just a test. It was an exposure moment. Evidence surfaced. Regulation reacted. manufacturers negotiated. And now, the sport stands on the verge of rewriting part of its own technical framework before the championship even begins. The question is no longer whether Mercedes built something clever. They clearly did. The question is whether that cleverness can survive institutional correction. Because Formula One rewards bold engineering. But it punishes bold engineering that destabilizes competitive balance. If the clarification stands, Mercedes must prove they can win without the edge that triggered the controversy. If they cannot, this moment will be remembered as the turning point. The moment the momentum shifted. The moment the season's trajectory changed. Before lights out. Before the first overtake. Before the first point was scored. Right now, everything depends on how Mercedes responds. Not with anger. Not with politics. But with adaptation. Because in Formula One, the teams that adapt fastest to shocks are the ones still fighting at the end of the year. And this shock may have just reshaped the entire championship.